I still have a photo of us. If it weren't for him, I'd have died in 35 in the snowy mountains.
Hundreds did die of cold, altitude sickness, and exhaustion. The shared hardships forged firm bonds between the soldiers and earned Mao unswerving loyalty.
Mao
Zedong gave me his ration to eat.
3个这个清口没的
3 little steamed buns in a little bowl this big.
一个小盘子。我当时不知道是毛泽东的。
At first I didn't know that it was Mao's. In one bite,
一口啊就吃了2。
I ate 2 of them.
以后呢？
When I found out it was his meal, I stopped eating.
哎，我知道是他的一顿饭，我就没吃了。毛泽东以后出来就。
He said you must eat.
为什么不吃？
You still have to march.
他说知道是他的一顿饭，他不吃了，他一定要吃。
He forced me to eat the last one.
强迫我又吃了一个。所以呢，毛泽东啊。
So Mao was very kind to his subordinates.
那个时候啊，非常的这个。
He took good care of us.
思想，非常的这个照顾。
The army now had to cross the grasslands. More people died here than on any other part of the march.
There was nothing there, absolutely nothing. As far as you could see, all there was marsh, the endless marsh. No trees, no houses, nothing. Stepping on the grass was like stepping on bean curd. It was soft. From time to time, someone stepped in the wrong spot and fell into the mud. If you fell in up to here, it was all over. When the mud was up to your chest, no one could save you. You could die at any second. You just couldn't tell.
We finally got hold of a newspaper and learned that there was a communist base in northern Shanxi province. It was only then that we decided to go there. We needed to rest and regroup. We knew it was extremely poor there, but we had nowhere else to go.
The communists reached Yan'an, the end of the Long March, in the fall of 1935. 95% of the Red Army had been lost.
But Mao didn't lose confidence. He asked us a question. Although there are now only 6,000 or 7,000 of us left, are we stronger or weaker than before? His answer was that we were stronger. He said the people who remained were gold.
Chiang Kai-shek had nearly wiped out the communists. But he faced another threat, a foreign threat, which many considered more dangerous than the communists: Japan. For years, Japan had had economic interests in North China and Manchuria. Throughout the 1920s, it expanded its interests and defended them with increasingly hostile military activity. Japan's aim was to colonize China. The Japanese posed the greatest threat to the warlord of the region, Zhang Shiliang. Zhang Shiliang was one of the most powerful men in China. He was the Generalissimo's second in command, and he retained his own huge, well-equipped army. In September 1931, the Japanese attacked Zhang Shuliang's troops.
We bore the brunt of the attack. The brigade commander gave orders. First, he telephoned me and asked me about the situation. Then he gave the order, "Don't resist. You are not permitted to resist." I pointed out that the enemy had already begun to attack. He said then, "Collect the soldiers' weapons and hide them in the storehouse." I said that there was no way I could collect the soldiers' weapons and hide them when the enemy was shelling us. He said, "Then why don't you withdraw?" I said, "I have only received an order to offer no resistance. I have no order to withdraw." He said, "It would be better if you withdraw. Otherwise, you will be held responsible." Then the phone was cut off.
The Chinese troops did not resist, and the Japanese quickly seized control of all of Manchuria. Chiang Kai-shek, afraid the Japanese military would crush China, had chosen a policy of non-resistance. His deputy commander, Zhang Shuliang, protested the situation. Many held him responsible. Others believed he had received orders from Chiang Kai-shek, and they blamed the government.
We should have resisted. If I had been brigade commander, I would not have withdrawn. I would have resisted until daylight. When a foreign army attacks the cities of another country in broad daylight, I don't think that can be justified to the world.
We have a saying, an army is maintained for 1,000 days to be used for one. Why didn't they fight? I was very angry.
The Japanese used Chinese protests as an excuse to attack Shanghai. This time, there was hard-fought resistance.
Hello, everybody. This is Floyd Gibbons speaking. This was the last stand, the last barricade of the Chinese forces of the 19th Route Army that opposed the advance of the Japanese Marines through these ruins. Hardly a month ago, families lived in these places, fathers, mothers, and children. This was all that they had in the world.
In that part of Chapei occupied by the Japanese, all means of communication are being destroyed. All Chinese found in this quarter are forced to undergo a thorough search as snipers. Possession of arms is taken as conclusive evidence of guilt, and the punishment is certain death.
A ceasefire was declared in Shanghai, but prospects for peace were dim. On March 1st, 1932, Japan set up a puppet government in Manchuria, which they renamed Manchukuo. They installed the former boy emperor, Puyi, now a young man, as head of state. The Chinese were angered and humiliated by the Japanese attacks and by the government's response. These feelings were expressed in demonstrations, the arts, and in feature films. But demonstrations against Japan were quickly suppressed by the government. Chiang Kai-shek was afraid these disturbances would provoke another attack, which China would not survive.
We weren't ready. We couldn't let a little event trigger a war between China and Japan before we were ready to fight. The best way out was to persuade the Japanese to give up the idea of invasion. We tried everything.
The nationalist policy was that to resist foreign aggression, the country first needs internal pacification. This was stated by Chiang Kai-shek, and it was in all the papers. It was absolutely necessary to wipe out the communists before we could fight Japan.
Mao and Zhu De knew that Chiang would strike while they were still weak from the long march. In an effort to prevent this and to harness popular anti-Japanese feeling, Mao called for the nationalists to unite with the communists against Japan. Mao declared, "We cannot even discuss communism if we are robbed of a country in which to practice it." But Chiang continued his plans to attack the communists. Again, Zhang Xuliang, seen here next to Chiang, disagreed. He and his men only wanted to fight Japan to recover their homeland. But they could not make the Generalissimo change his mind. In December 1936, in a desperate act which shocked the country, Zhang Xuliang ordered his commander kidnapped. Sun Mingzhu and some heavily armed soldiers stormed Chiang Kai-shek's residence.
When I got to the bedroom, I saw that it was a mess and no one was there. I felt Chiang Kai-shek's bed. It was still warm, so I knew he hadn't been gone long. So we went up, and behind the hill I saw him squeezed between two rocks. It was a spot that everyone called Tiger Stone Rock. He was standing there. He was very frightened. His face was covered with dirt. He was in pajamas because he hadn't had time to get dressed. I saluted and said, "Please, Generalissimo, come quickly." I was afraid that someone might shoot him. I felt a heavy responsibility.
The day he was kidnapped, our Central Committee immediately held meetings. In the evening, we held an emergency meeting. Everyone was trying to figure out how to save him. Madame Chiang flew to Xi'an.
Chiang Kai-shek feared he would be put on trial and executed.
If anything should happen to Mr. Chiang, no one in China would be able to fight Japan. Nobody would be able to stop Japan, and the Japanese would certainly march into China. That would be certain. No one would resist.
All China watched as his fate hung in the balance. Shanghai, China, the Paris of the Orient. In newsreels of the 1920s and 30s, life here looked fun, an exotic mix of East and West. The reality of China was different. Most Chinese lived in the country, where their lives continued largely untouched by the 20th century.